Some stories are not written in bright ink. They are etched in silence. Hidden behind polite smiles and quiet nods, they live in the shadows where words are swallowed and pain wears a mask. These stories don't unfold in diaries or letters. They unfold in silence, in the pauses between conversations, in the eyes that look away when truth feels too heavy. For Pinky Hills, silence was her first inheritance. She grew up on cracked clay floors, where survival meant obedience, and dreams were as fragile as dust carried away by the wind. In her world, love was measured by how well you obeyed, how much you endured, and how little you asked. She was taught, like the women before her, that to be silent was to be loyal, and to sacrifice was to prove love. 2 generations of women carried this same burden, mothers who endured quietly and daughters who learned to do the same. The message was clear. Obedience was love, silence was safety, and invisibility was survival. But this survival came at a cost. It erased voices, it erased worth, and it erased the possibility of living fully seen. Pinky Hills lived unseen. She lived invisible, bound by rules she did not create and expectations she did not choose. To the outside world, she looked like many others, polite, agreeable, smiling at the right times. But inside, she felt small, erased, and unworthy. The silence around her was not peaceful. It was heavy, pressing against her chest, convincing her that her life was meant to be endured rather than lived. Yet, silence, no matter how carefully preserved, has a breaking point. There comes a moment when the weight of being unseen is heavier than the fear of being noticed. For Pinky Hills, that moment arrived when she realized that silence was not love, it was bondage. Obedience was not devotion, it was a curse passed down from generation to generation. And so, she chose to speak. It began quietly, almost hesitantly. Words scribbled in secret, thoughts whispered only to herself. But those small acts of courage cracked the walls that silence had built around her. Each word she wrote was an act of defiance, each sentence a step toward freedom. For the first time, Pinky Hills was not hiding. She was reclaiming her story, unseen. The Unexpressed Curse is more than a memoir. It is the breaking of silence, the refusal to carry the curse any longer. By telling her truth, she broke a cycle that had imprisoned women in her family for generations. She showed that worth is not found in obedience. It is not given by others. It is not earned through silence. Worth is inherent, unshakable, and cannot be erased. But breaking silence is not easy. It is not a single moment of bravery, but a series of choices, each one difficult, each one demanding strength. There were days when Pinky Hills felt the pull of silence again, days when tradition whispered that she was betraying her family, her community, her very identity. But she kept going, because once silence is broken, it cannot fully return. Her words reached others who had lived in shadows, women who had been told their pain was unworthy of expression, women who had learned to cover their wounds with quiet smiles. In her story, they saw themselves. They saw proof that invisibility was not their destiny, that silence was not their inheritance, and that healing was possible. Generational curses are not broken by chance. They are broken by choice. And Pinky Hills made that choice, not just for herself, but for the women who came before her and the women who would come after. By daring to speak, she shattered the illusion that silence was safety. She replaced obedience with courage, invisibility with presence, and unworthiness with truth. Her journey is a reminder that silence may protect others, but it suffocates the one who carries it. Obedience may keep peace on the surface, but it kills the voice beneath. to live unseen is not to live at all. And so, Pinky Hills chose to live fully seen, fully heard, and fully worthy. For many, unseen is not just her story. It is a voice for the silenced. It is courage written on every page, a mirror reflecting back the stories of countless others who have endured quietly. It is a testimony that healing is possible, that worth can be reclaimed, and that silence does not have to be the final word. In her journey, Pinky Hills faced not just her own silence, but the silence of generations. She carried the weight of her mother's quiet endurance, the shadow of her grandmother's obedience, and the lessons of a community that taught invisibility as a virtue. And yet, she dared to ask, what if silence is not love? What if obedience is not loyalty? What if worth has nothing to do with suffering? The answers were not given easily. They had to be found in the struggle of writing, in the courage of speaking, in the pain of breaking apart a lifetime of quiet. But the answers came. They came in the realization that worth was never lost. It was always there, waiting to be claimed. They came in the understanding that healing does not erase the past, but transforms it into strength. They came in the power of telling a story that had been waiting for generations to be heard. Today, her silence is no longer her prison. It is her history, and her voice is her freedom. Through Unseen, Pinky Hills has given language to pain that once had none. She has turned quiet suffering into powerful testimony. She has broken a curse, and in doing so, opened the door for countless others to step through. This is not just her victory. It belongs to every woman who was told that obedience was love, every child who grew up on cracked clay floors believing they were unworthy, every voice that was silenced before it could sing. Her story carries them all. Some stories are etched in silence, but they do not stay there forever. When one person dares to speak, the silence cracks. When one person refuses to be unseen, others learn to step into the light. Pinky Hills is that person. Her voice is not just her own. It is a chorus rising on behalf of the silenced, the unseen, and the unworthy. And so, Unseen, the Unexpressed Curse, stands as more than a memoir. It is a declaration, a promise that silence will no longer be the inheritance, a reminder that worth is not given, it is lived. A story that transforms invisibility into presence, obedience into freedom, and silence into song. Because silence may shape a life, but it does not have to define it. And when one woman dares to speak, she breaks not only her own curse, but the curse of generations. Pinky Hills spoke, and in her voice, many will find their own.